Hi, guys. Thank you for joining me today. Happy Easter, everyone. Oh my gosh, it's the day that we celebrate our Lord's resurrection. It's it's always been one of my favorite days of the year. It's just awesome. Well, today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Not different, but I haven't done a Storytime Sunday episode in a long time. What Storytime Sunday is basically, I sit back and tell a fictional story. And if you look on my channel, there's a whole playlist named Storytime Sunday. And this will be added onto it today. So basically, um, instead of a sermon, you're going to get a fictional story, which is another one of the gifts that God has given me, and I may, and I will sneak something in after each character. Um, I was listening to the song called "Exchange" by Sons of Sunday, and this story came to me, and I was just so I was just so moved by the story. Um, this picture, these characters, this story came to me. So, um, in lieu of a traditional sermon, I'm going to tell this story. Now, um, this story is completely fictional from my own head. Um, and I'm usually not too graphic in the telling of these things, but um, I might have to say some things that are a bit graphic, so keep that in mind as you listen. So, as they would say uh, on the TV when I was growing up, viewer discretion is advised, but it's not going to be too bad. But I may have to explain something um, for the story to make sense. So, um, without further ado, the Great Exchange. This story starts off with Pastor Serrano. He is a church pastor of what they would call a well, I don't like this term, but what they would call a mega church, like a huge church, and a bunch of um, uh, campuses. And he and his wife have been married for like 30 years. And when they started out the church, it was so amazing what God did. He grew up in a small town, and then he began preaching at the age of 7. He would sit out on his stoop and just um, um, begin to preach at the age of 7, and people just came to watch him speak, and preach, and people were just moved to tears, and uh, they were like just overcome with God's presence from this little um, little kid who was just very quiet, but when he would open his mouth, he would just be like so filled with the Spirit of God. So uh, he preached as a teenager, and then when he was a teenager, uh, he went to a school in a really rough area, and then a really rough area with a lot of gang violence and a lot of shootings. But when he would open his mouth, people would just be crying, the Spirit of God would be moving. And so there was um, one day where uh, he this the Spirit of God was so moving that that kids his age, he gave an invitation for them to accept Christ. And the kids came running to the front of the stage because he was preaching and preaching. And that next week he asked uh, somebody at his at a pool, the town a town over, if he can use the pool to do baptisms. So he was now that was the first time he had community baptisms, um, where youth people his age got baptized, older people got baptized, everybody, just like the Spirit of God would fall on this young man. When he became a teenager, it became um, even more like he would just open up his mouth and the word of God would just come on it, and he would share the scriptures with people in such a unique way. And then when he graduated high school, he went to Bible college. And in Bible college, he met his wife, Henrietta. And when he and even in the college, even in this Christian Bible college, he could talk to anybody. He was very social. And him and Henrietta just lit up the whole Bible school for Jesus Christ. So anyway, uh, so after Bible college, they got married shortly after. And then they had a daughter, Lacey. And everything was wonderful. They started their church, they were raising their daughter, until one day um, there was a fire in their home, and by the like when when Pastor Serrano woke up, the fire had already filled the room, and rushed. He just rushed um, to wake up his wife, and um, they were coughing, 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 coughing. Uh, he opened the door, rushed to his daughter's room, and um, and his daughter, um, he went in to check on her and get her out. He picked her up without thinking she was sleeping, but he ran out of the they they both ran out of the house with they ran out of the house with their daughter thinking that she was sleeping. But when the firefighters checked her, unfortunately, he didn't know that the fire had gotten to her lungs and she had passed away. Now, this was devastating. Um, this was totally devastating. And then after their daughter had passed away, um, his wife didn't take it well, of course, because she was the mother, but she was more able to cope and deal with stuff. So, as they were going through the grief of their daughter, um, it for some people, grief brings them together, makes them stronger, it bonds them. But for the Serranos, the grief of losing losing their young daughter really tore them apart. And they didn't do the smart thing to take some time and grieve, and they just kept on soldiering on. And people were like, "Oh my God, you're so strong. The Lord is really using you." But but as many preachers know, you can portray something on the inside. No, you can portray something on the outside that is not true on the inside. And from the outside, they were portraying, yes, God is still with us. Yes, God is still with us, and we're grieving, but we're okay. But on the outside, but on the inside, um, they were, especially Pastor Serrano, was act was totally blaming himself. Why didn't I wake up sooner? Why didn't I realize that there was going to be a fire? Why didn't I check the heaters? Because it was a faulty heater because they lived in an old house, so the heater caught fire. So he was like, "Why didn't I check the heater?" And all this blame and all this shame and all this stuff just fell upon him. But he didn't stop and heal. He didn't stop and heal. He didn't go for counseling, none of that. He just soldiered on. And as he soldiered on, the church got bigger. Because one thing I should tell you, about gifting and anointing. Sometimes the human person of you could be dealing with some stuff, but you are still able to function in gifting and anointing. And um, but you're living in hell at home. So the church kept growing because they thought this was a wonderful story of God's grace and how they lost their daughter and how they were able to get through that. That was just added to their story. But that part of the story wasn't true, because what they were telling people is that the grace of God got them through. Yes, they still miss her, but the grace of God is getting them through. They were saying all the right things, but internally they were separating from each other. They were like just be just begin to coast because of all this notoriety and because of all this grief. People didn't really see the person of Pastor Serrano and his wife. They just saw this great man of God and great woman of God, but they didn't see that the person was hurting. And it got to the point, the coasting got so bad, is that every Easter and every Christmas sermon was the same. He would just slap a different title on it. Nobody would know, slap a different title on it, name the points differently, and no one would know the difference. Everybody would say, "Oh my gosh, it's so great!" Like, with saying, "Isn't this the same sermon as last year, but a different title, and the points are named differently?" So he was able to hide behind his gifting. And um, and then, yeah. So as part of a community initiative, um, the board, the head of the church board, um, said that everybody in the community had to do something to help out. So they wanted to, because of his notoriety, uh, have him lead this group of different individuals to have them share um, their feelings and their thoughts, whatever. And he said, "Oh, great! This is another opportunity for you know um, for me to uh, be on brand or whatever." Now he said yes to this, like really being the leader of this group, but he didn't really go into it for helping people. He was like, "Well, I can coast. They're probably going to send me a bunch of church people who uh, who love me anyway, so it doesn't matter." The first day of the group, um, he 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 met this this woman, and the woman came over and shook his hand and said, Praise the Lord. I'm Sister Jessica, very self-righteous and very, she's just a very, um, very self-righteous person. And she's like, I've always wanted to meet you. This is so great. You are such a blessing and whatever. So her story is she um she grew up as and one of six children, and she was the first of six children. And being the first of six children, she had to help her mother out. Like, she basically had to be an adult when she be- became 10. So she helped her mother do this and that and this, like do the grocery shopping, do the housework, do everything. And so she was forced to grow up really fast. So she never had a childhood. In fact, on her prom, she had to take her her brother and sister to the doctor because they had both broken their legs, and she was so looking forward to going to prom, and the person that she had was going to prom with, he he went with another girl, and he said, oh, you're just too serious. And so she just she just went on with her life. But she didn't realize that resentment had built up to her for her parents for letting her just become an adult, being a third adult in the home instead of a kid. So she had all this resentment. And when she was about in when she was about that night after prom, she had found um, there was a street minister just talking and ministering the gospel, and he handed her a piece of paper that said Jesus is the way. And then she accepted the Lord and went to her church. But w- without proper teaching and without proper guidance, she still carried that resentment from with her parents, and started to see, started to not only judge her parents, but judge everyone around her, because she thought, deep inside her, she thought that she was lacking. She knew that she was lacking. But instead of looking at herself, she would look at other people and see how they were lacking. Because if no one gave her grace, if no one gave her the ability to grow and be a child when she was young, why would she give that to someone else? So she was carrying a lot of resentment toward, towards God, and and a lot of different issues, resentment towards her parents, resentment towards her brothers and sisters, and anger and pain that she missed out on her childhood, that she had to drive her siblings from school at 17 instead of going to the movies with her friends or whatever, instead of hanging out and playing with her friends instead of being a kid. So she harbored a lot of resentment and transferred that resentment. Excuse me. She transferred that resentment to other people. So it actually was meanness. It actually manifested as meanness outward, but it was self-hatred inward, because she was like, why wasn't I worth a childhood? Why wasn't I worth hanging out with my friends? Why wasn't I worth anything like that? Why couldn't I have one day to be a kid? And when she looked at the Bible, she didn't look at the Bible as something of grace. She looked at the Bible as through the lens of judgment. Her favorite scriptures were the ones in the Old Testament uh, uh, where a whole bunch of people were killed. Those were her favorite ones because she felt like those were her people because she was angry. So she was in this group. She was the first one that came to the door. The second participant that came through the door was called Deep Freeze. Now, Deep Freeze was a hip hop artist. He grew up on the streets. He'd actually been um, a hip hop artist since he was 11, and his older brother bought him all these tapes, and he was really close with his older brother. But 2 years later, when he was 13, his older brother was going to the grocery store, and he was gunned down. And the death of his older brother really changed him. And he began to channel all that anger, all that pain, all that resentment into music. And he began to study the great rappers like Tupac and Biggie and all of those great rappers, and began to mimic them and began to write raps um, um, that were so good, and people really gravitated to him when he was performing. And one time, uh, a producer uh, came to where he was performing, and the man was stunned. And then from there, he began to get bigger and bigger and bigger, just really big. And then he got #1 records, platinum records, and was able to buy like um, a house, and then two houses, and then several cars, and then and then when you get that rich and that high and no one can tell you no, that's when the trouble started. So one day after a show, um, he saw a girl which he thought that she must have been 18 or 19. So he seduced her. Come to find out, she was only 15. So, and then, but because he got away with it that time, he said, "Why don't you bring your friends?" She, so he, so the girl brought her friends because she was like, "Wow, Deep Freeze really likes me." So the girl brought her friends, and eventually it became like a brothel, and it just became out of control. But no, but his management tried to tell him no. Everybody around him tried to tell him no, but he just wouldn't listen, because in his eyes he was untouchable. And when you think you're untouchable, you don't listen. And then, okay, so one day after a show, because he was still doing shows, he was still doing albums, he was still like just a brilliant artist. One day after a show, the the police arrested him um, at the club that he was performing at, because they had found pictures of what he would do with these young girls. And there was a trial uh, 2 years later, and he was convicted of uh, sexual misconduct, sexual assault, and he got um, 15 years in jail. And so he served his 15 years, and he he got out of jail. And then now he's just so angry because when he went to jail, he lost everything. He lost everything, and he's blaming God. He's blaming everyone. And so he was the third person that walked in to this meeting. Um, and the last person that walked into this meeting was a transgender woman named Benita. Now Benita was was born Ben. She was born a boy. Like, and they named her Ben. Like, her his name was Ben. And but ever since Ben was little, he was fascinated with like women and women's clothes, and he was fascinated with little girls and how they moved. He felt he didn't feel he was a boy on the outside, but he felt kind of strange. He felt like that body wasn't his, and he felt that, and he didn't know what was going on. He he would try and play with the other boys, like he would try and play basketball and try and do wrestling and all that roughhousing, and it just wasn't him, and he didn't know what was going on. And then he would try, he would play with the little girls and play with their Barbies and help them put on their makeup. And that is the place where he felt he belonged. Like, but he was like, I'm a boy, what's going on? And he didn't know this until at the age of 14 he saw um, these uh, um, at the age of 14 he snuck into a drag show where these men would dress as women, and he says, and something inside him said, yes, uh, that's me, that's totally me. And something inside him came alive, like it was like, yes. So when he was about 16, he got a summer job to save up his money and buy his first set of women's clothes. And when he put them on and looked in the mirror, something happened to him. Something like pieces of him began to fall into place. And he was like, yes, this is totally me. So as he figured that out, he got really into the transgender community. The chapter of his city, the LGBT chapter of the city, and um, he just began to be celebrated and whatever. But there was he saw the pastor said she saw no, because after he put on the clothes for the first time, he said, don't call me Ben, call me Benita. So his friends and everyone around him started to call started to call her Benita, and she was just getting ready to have she was 25 at this time, and she was getting ready to have her gender reassignment surgery to really become female. But she saw the Pastor Serrano, on the TV, and something about what he was saying just 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 stirred in her heart about the love of Jesus and how Jesus loved her, um and then she was getting ready to turn it off, and at the end of uh the television program, they advertised this group that Pastor Tirana was starting, um, for the community, about with different people who wanted to know about Christ with different issues and stuff like that. So and she had bumped into Christians before. She knew what they felt like, that she was going to hell, and she was still a boy, and she knew how they felt. But there was something about her, that something in her that said she should go to that meeting, and she tossed and turned all night, and she was like, it she just she just knew that she had to attend that meeting, um, and she managed to schedule the surgery uh, for a few months, but um, uh, she hadn't started taking the hormones yet, but um, she had her first appointment um, in a week before a week a week before the the group started. So she figured she figured that she could go, so, and figure out what this thing was about, why she felt like she could go, and she knew that she was probably going to get busted on and by these Christians, but something compelled her to go, and so so she's there at this meeting. So everyone there at this meeting, Pastor Serrano, uh, Sister Jennifer, I think I called her Sister Jennifer. If I didn't, forgive me. Deep Freeze and Benita, all all were at this meeting together, all coming with their different issues and um, different places. The first meeting of this group, um, they hadn't really come up with a name for it. It was just called a group, so they had to come up with a name for it. And they said, "We don't know. Can we just call it the group? It's stupid anyway." Be- and Pastor Serrano said, "Fine, that's fine." So they each went around the room and said who they were, um, and told their stories, and that was basically it for the first group. And each of the people, they left like thinking that was a waste of time. They just like the group didn't really gel really well. And because Pastor Toretto's heart wasn't really in it, it was just not going well. Well, he said, um, but for the community projects, he had to do it for 6 weeks. The next week, um, is they they talked they talked more, but Jennifer and Benita were at each other's throats constantly because they didn't like each other, especially because Benita is transgender, and Jennifer was the judgmentalist of the group. They came to blows this. They almost came to blows the second meeting, and like insults were hurled on both sides. It was just insane. And it was just insane. And the third meeting, uh, third meeting, Pastor Serrano and Deep Freeze almost came almost came to blows because Pastor Serrano had a daughter that died in the fire, as I said previously. And just to think that uh, that Deep Freeze had sexually assaulted all these women, he thought of his own daughter when he looked at him. So they almost got into a fist fight. The ladies had to break them up, and so the first 3 weeks of meetings were a disaster. It was just crazy, and Pastor Toretto like, this is not working. I've got to call them and say, you know what, I wanted to do this, but these group of people that you sent me, these these three people, they're not working. And he's like, I don't even know the what the point of this is. And one day, Pastor Serrano was in his office, ready to give up on this whole ministry thing, ready to uh, give up on everything. And um, and then the Lord said, the exchange is for everyone. So, and he was like, the exchange? What do you mean? He said, and there was, and on his YouTube, his wife was on her YouTube. His wife is more familiar with computers than he is. And because they're still married, but they live separate lives now, um, the marriage is so damaged that they live separate lives now, but they still share a computer. So he was he went to YouTube, and his 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 wife was listening to uh, the song "The Exchange" by Sons of Sunday, and she was listening to it, and he was curious about what this song was about. What When he heard it, he was like, "Wow!" Um, so and he started crying and crying and crying. He he just started crying because he realized that all those people, him being a pastor and coasting, um, sis, Sister Jennifer being a self-righteous person who was hurt because of um her parents not letting her have a childhood. Um, Benita, who is a transgender person, all of them, they needed the exchange. Um, they needed the exchange that Christ gave for all of them, and the exchange was not for like the real bad sinners like Deep Freeze, who had sexually molested women and and abused his power to sexually molest women. But the exchange was also needed for Jennifer and her bitterness. And if they would submit their, if they would embrace the exchange, um, that that all those negative emotions like shame and guilt and fear and all of that, that's what this group was about. So Pastor Serrano uh, woke up with he started writing because he started to see what this group was supposed to be about. And he started seeing why the community had him lead this group. And he came with a new lease on life, a new passion. So when he came, um, he first of all he said, "Everybody sit down," and he's like, and Chief Priest is like, "I don't know what we're doing here, dog. We've been here the past few weeks, and nothing's been going on. I don't even know why the community installed the program." He's like, "I didn't either until last night." And then and then and and then Benita's like, "What are you talking about?" And he played for them the song called "The Exchange." And when he was finished playing the song, there was not a dry eye in the room. Everybody was crying. or putting their head down, because they realized that Christ went to the cross for all of them, for Sister Jennifer's self-righteousness, for Deep Freeze's fear and issues, and um, sexual issues and issues with women, and for his for Pastor Serrano's anger issues as well, dealing with his fear, dealing with whatever he's got to deal with, uh, dealing with the death of his daughter and the grief of his daughter. And Christ also went to the cross for whatever transgender issues Benita was having, whatever self identity issues Benita was having. And it was not about changing them. It was not predominantly getting them to change. It was about giving their lives over to Christ. So three three 3 weeks in, they had all been so moved by that song that they all went home and Benita thought about it, thought about her life as Ben, thought about her confusion, thought about everything, thought about her not feeling like a boy, her feeling like she was a girl, her feeling like she was a failure, you know, her feeling that excitement when she first put on the garment as a girl. She thought about all of that. And she was like, and she's like, Lord, I want the exchange, whether I am a woman or a man. She's like, that is not truly what matters to you right now. But what matters to you is my heart. So change my heart and change me. And she just, it was like something happened to her. Some chain broke in her life. And it was just so moving. It was like, it didn't matter for that moment what gender she was, what, you know, she identified as. What mattered in that particular moment was that she realized that she was Christ, and when she was Christ, all of that other stuff and gender identity stuff would come later. And she didn't know what he would do, but all she knew was that she needed to put her life in his hands, whether she would remain woman or whether she would um, find find whether he would find himself as a man. She knew that that wasn't the main issue. The main issue was she, she was Christ, and he died for her on the cross. And whatever whatever gender she would end up being, the most important thing was that she was his. So she got up and just fell down on her knees and just said, "Lord, take me." She said, I don't know what else to say, but take me and take my life. And for Pastor Serrano, he went back to his office. And when he went back to his office, uh, he just sat there and said, tears kept pouring down his eyes, and he said, "Lord, I failed you. My passion for you has totally gone. And I've forgotten who I was and who you were. Show me what 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 the great exchange means in my life." He said, "Show me what the great exchange means in my life." And he's like, "Lord, I started on fire for you, but the more the accolades came, the more I began to lose myself. And I just want that exchange. Thank you for reminding me what your cross did for me, and I'm so sorry. The times that I forgot about you, the times that I used you for my own personal gain, the times that I just took it cavalierly and just slapped a, a old word together, thinking that no one else would know, but you know." And he's like, "I need the great exchange right now." And Deep Freeze was like, when he got back to the halfway house where he was living, he the Lord started knocking on his heart, and he was so overcome with himself, and he began to just speak to the Lord and cry out to the Lord, and he just began um, to just want the great exchange for himself, because he realized, he said, "Lord, all the money and all the fame that I have, I didn't use it for good. I could have used it for good, but I used it for my own sexual pl- pleasure. And I thought I was too high, that no one would catch me. And then when I went to jail, you tried knocking on the door of my heart, but it was too hard. But today when I heard that song, something broke in me." He's like, "Lord, I need you to take me and change me. I need you to exchange my shame and my wicked deeds. To those girls, I need you to exchange for your love and for your grace. And so all of them went home and just poured their hearts out to the Lord. And then at the next week, which was the fourth week, they came back, and when they came back, it was a totally different group. The four of them were like a totally different group, and they began to talk about like what the Lord had revealed about each of their lives, and they began to pray for each other and ask each other for forgiveness, and ask for the Lord's guidance in their group, and they just began to celebrate that great exchange that they all received the week before. And the fifth week, um, Benita came in and said, he look, she's like, she's like, I want to share this great exchange with other people, not only in the LGBT community, but she's like, I want to share this great exchange that I received with other people. But he's and she's like, yeah, I think it's a great idea. He, she's like, I finally found a name that would work for this group. And Pastor Serrano's like, what? Exchange students. Because we received the great exchange, but we're all still learning how to operate in it. So we're all students of it. So exchange students. He's like, I love that idea. And when Jennifer and Deep Freeze got there, she told them about the name and they loved it too. And to end my story, I'm going to just say Benita created a group um, of people from the LGBT community just to come and talk and share about their experiences. Uh, People that were having a hard time um, coming out of the closet and dealing with those issues, it was just a safe space to 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 share and to share what she had gone through about the great exchange. And people had all different reactions. Some people were disgusted, and some people were thankful, but she could only share her story. And with Deep Freeze, he actually was so inspired about what he learned about the Great Exchange that they he used his gift for hip hop to become a Christian hip hop artist. And because he didn't want the trappings of money and whatever, he used all of his extra money instead of buying cars and houses again. he used all his extra money to support people um, in his old neighborhood to create sports programs and to to share his story and what the Great Exchange Group did for him. And um, one day he met up with Jennifer again after this was about a year after the group had disbanded and everyone was doing well. They met up again, went out for coffee, and eventually um, they they felt the Holy Spirit was calling them uh, to get married and start a church. So they got married and started a church, but this church was different. This church was for um, people, was for all kinds of people, but he would use hip hop verse in his sermons, and people were flooding his church, the ministry that God had put in both of them. So the person that was so judgmental of him at the beginning was not only his wife, but helping him in this very unique ministry using hip hop and what he knew about hip hop verse to to um, to minister to people. And oh, I forgot to say about Jennifer and the Great Exchange. Her great exchange was forgiveness for her to her parents for um, just just letting her not have a childhood and being so angry at them for years. So that was her great exchange. Forgive me if I did Jennifer before. I don't think so. But if I didn't, that was her great exchange. If I did, forgive me. Um, so I hope you enjoyed my Storytime Sunday story. If you want more Storytime Sunday stories, those of you watching, I have a playlist on my channel called Storytime Sunday, so you can go over there. And if you want to hear the song The Great Exchange, you can just plug it in on, no, not The Great Exchange, The Exchange by Sons of Sunday. You can just plug it in on YouTube, or you can, I'm going to put it on my Rachel's Rhythms page, and you can listen to it there. Thank you guys. Bye.